Welcome back. Hope you've enjoyed our previous segment talking Speedway with Sheffield and Berwick rider Jai Etheridge, available to watch again if somehow you've managed to miss it. Let's now turn attention then to Fans Pulse Lap 2, sponsored by Maitland Travel. From day one, 360 Speedway set out to become a bit of a regular place for supporters to come together to debate, to discuss and share opinion on all things Speedway, to give all supporters a bit of a voice and to help shape to as much as possible the discussion agenda that we have weekly on 360 Speedway, and hopefully to give a little bit of enjoyment along the way as well. We are fans talking with fans. We're now about to give some airtime and voice to a handful of perfectly regular Speedway supporters who were brave enough to put their heads above the Speedway parapet under the boundaries of the Speedway Fans Network UK. The three individuals we're about to meet, amongst several others, stepped in to harness wider supporter feedback and ideas with a view to tabling that, largely via some engagement with Phil Morris, directly within the governing body of British Speedway. Let's now meet and hear from them directly just how that process has worked, its scope, its findings, its achievements, and where they are currently up to. Let's introduce then on 360 Speedway each of Sam Lorryman, David Umney, David Lowe. Welcome everyone, thanks for being the first ever British Speedway supporters in the truest sense to appear on 360 Speedway. Sam, I think you're the first female ever to appear on camera on 360 Speedway. So a proud moment for you, Sam.
No pressure.
Listen, everyone watching will be super keen to hear about the journey that you guys have been on. So just before we launch into asking any questions or giving any answers, I do want to say, not for the first time on 360 Speedway, that all of the opinions expressed are those of us as individuals and bear no resemblance whatsoever to any Speedway clubs that we are or were associated to. Disclaimer out the way. Sam, I'm going to come to you first, Sam. First of all, if you don't mind, tell us which club that you're a supporter of, and tell us, if you don't mind, Sam, exactly what is Speedway Fans Network? When was it created, and what was it created to do?
Right. Originally, going back to when I was a child, right through to sort of, well, still present time, but essentially I was Lakeside Hammers, Arena Essex, of which we know obviously we have now lost that club. Without going to the full story, quite a few years back, I moved to Shropshire, and my nearest club then was Wolverhampton. So I went as a Wolverhampton, probably spectator more than supporter, because my heart still lied with Lakeside at the end of the day for all those years. And that then when we lost Lakeside, it kind of opened it up for me to go, okay, I can sort of go full in with Wolves now. And that's what I've done. And I must have jinxed it because obviously they've gone as well. So that's left me in the situation, as many fans, without a club. So now I obviously just enjoy the sport as a neutral, although I've got obviously riders that I favour, but generally speaking, I just support the sport as a whole now. And I do think when you've lost your club, you have a whole different perspective on it. You see it in a completely different light. And that kind of, it ties in with the Speedway Fans Network, which we set up about 2.5 years ago now. It was actually a gentleman called Nick that set it up originally. He was a Wolves fan as well. And he said when he heard the news that Wolves were closing, he sort of looked online and looked on social media to see if there was anywhere that he could reach out to sort of get some kind of answers or help or something. And he was quite shocked there was nothing out there. So he set up a little group initially of obviously just a handful of us to see if we could try and do what we could to improve the sport, hear what fans had to say, perhaps what's going wrong, what we can do to, change it and stuff. And it just started off with just sort of a handful of us originally. And now obviously all this time on, we've got, quite a few people within the group now. And the main objective has always been to hear everybody's voices, to hear what they have to say. We know there's a lot of things that need to be looked at in the sport, but we're very keen to make sure that there's always something proactive coming from it. It's not a case of just going on and, moaning about it and not having an answer for what your problem is, if you like. So that's what we've been championing for, really. And then shortly after we got together, we heard about the Fans Voice representatives that was being put out. Phil Morris wanted these reps for the Premiership. And as a group, we come together and we said, yeah, that's great, but there's a lot of fans that aren't within the Premiership, Championship, obviously, National Development League, and a lot of fans now, like all we were, without a club.
Yes.
So we went to Phil. We weren't really sure if we were going to get a response, but fair play, he got back pretty quick and he asked if he could have a meeting with us, which we did do. And he said, would we like to go on with the fans reps and represent all those outside the Premiership and without clubs, basically. So that's what we done. And I myself sit on with the reps. But obviously, you know, I'm just the face, if you like. I'm representing the Speedway Fans Network as a whole. So that's how it all kind of started. I don't know if David Umney wants to add anything more. Have I missed anything, or have I pretty much covered it?
No, I mean, that pretty much covers it. I mean, one of the things I would say about Speedway Fans Network is we've tried just to act as a place for sort of a positive exchange of ideas. We don't heavily police the comments on the group, so the comments on the group don't necessarily represent our views, but we try to give everybody an opportunity to express their views. And I think in the 2.5 years, we've only had to sort of block one person, and that wasn't because of his views about Speedway. That was because he was just plain abusive. So you know, it is a place where everybody can express their views. And I think, as Sam said, we didn't particularly set out to think, right, this is our route to get to the governing body. We just wanted to set up a place where people could exchange views. But having seen that Phil Morris was setting up his Fans Voices group, it seemed to us to be a reasonable way to try to find a route that we could collate everybody's views from the wider group and be able to put those through to Phil and hopefully to the management committee and to the BSPL, and that's what we've done. So all the way through from the time of the commencement of the Fans Voices group, we have pretty much monthly, but certainly, you know, not much further than that. We just tabulate all the views that people put forward, send that into Phil. Phil assures us he reads it. I've no reason to doubt that he reads it. And for the AGM, which would have been November 2024, Phil put that document or that spreadsheet to the AGM, and we understand that, you know, all promoters saw the information and were therefore able to see what the wider group of supporters were putting forward as suggestions. And I don't know, Derek, we can go into that in a bit more detail if you want to later on.
Yeah, thanks, David, and thanks, Sam. That's a terrific overview of the origin, I guess, and a sense of the journey and the objectives of what you guys set out to do. Can I just tie up a couple of things? I'll just clarify a couple of things. So when we talk about Speedway Fans Network, and Dave, you talked about, you know, not moderating it too heavily. What you're referring to, correct me if I'm wrong, is a Facebook page, which is entitled Speedway Fans Network UK. So I think you've got a couple of thousand, 2,000 or 3,000 members.
About 2,300, I think, at the moment. And I have to say, we haven't heavily publicised it, so we haven't gone out and promoted it too much, because we wanted to see whether it would grow and whether we could get traction. But I guess, you know, if you think in terms of the fans of any particular club, we've probably got a representative number to be equal to most clubs' support base. So we're not a huge group, but by the same token, we're not a small group either.
Yeah.
I think with it as well, though, by keeping it private, we thought if we went public with it, you can have so many thousands on there, you just can't keep track. And it was so important that we did get information, that we did hear what people had to say, that we wanted to be able to keep it manageable. You know, if you've got 10, 20,000 people on there, there's no way you're going to be able to keep up with that. So it was more about, I say, like quality rather than quantity. I feel like it was important that we could keep track on what everybody was saying. So that's another reason why we did sort of keep it private.
No, that makes sense, Sam. And you know, and it's putting social media to some good and positive use for the benefit of Speedway. David L. I'm going to differentiate. We've got two Davids on tonight. So I'm going to differentiate by David L. and David U. David L. If we can bring you in, David. So Sam, I think, mentioned earlier on about, you know, perhaps originally there was a bit of an orientation in favour of Premiership clubs and Premiership club representatives. But you know, can you just sort of update that view, David? Does the Speedway Fans Network UK now encompass representation across Premiership, Championship, and potentially even NDL?
Yeah, it does. We're all so I'm the fans voice rep for Leicester. I probably should have asked to go first, shouldn't I? Watch and follow Sam and David now with what I do. So I grew up going to Long Eaton until 96, 97 when it closed. Spent a year going to Sheffield in 98, and then I was nomad for a long time until Leicester came back in 2011. And then just found my love back for Speedway again, got back into it, and then 2 years ago, Phil Morris launched the fans voice reps for the Premiership club because he's the CEO for the Premiership, so that's his initial remit. And it was about 2 years ago this month, I think we had our first meeting and it all came together. I applied for Leicester, was very fortunate to get picked, and since then I've been sort of learning more about behind the scenes at Leicester, getting more involved with Leicester and just trying to be useful. And one of the great tools is that the Speedway Fans Network exists. What Sam and David have been doing has been brilliant, because all the other reps from all the other clubs in the Premiership are all in that group. And if anyone does put a question out there specifically for the Premiership, Sam or David, whoever sees it first, can just tag us into it to get conversations going. Or I know David's passed on my email address on the British Speedway Forum, I believe it was, on a couple of occasions as well. So they've been brilliant in sort of helping steer people to us and get our names out there as the Premiership voice reps. And I know Sam did a great job of reaching out to all the Championship clubs, trying to engage with them. We've got a couple of supporters club, I think, as well, Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, that you've engaged with over the last 2 years. So they're a great group to have, and it's been sort of really fun getting to know. We're seeing Sam and David trackside over the last 2 years as well, and having conversations with them now.
Sam, are there any gaps across in the representation across the clubs? Is there any 360 viewers out there that you might want to target and invite to get in touch?
I mean, generally speaking, one of the main sort of things we wanted to try and achieve was we did contact, as David Lowe just said, we contacted all the Championship clubs and National Development League. Obviously, a lot crossover in that respect, don't they? But we also tried to contact a lot of supporters clubs as well. And unfortunately, everything just fell on deaf ears. So in regards to, you know, who we try to sort of reach out to, there is no specific person as such. It's just anybody that basically wants to save the sport, improve the sport, and anybody that has got, you know, proactive, good ideas that could potentially be used, that these clubs, you know, can sort of, you know, take on board. But then the problem we have, dare I say it, is that we can give all this information to the clubs and everything like that, but unfortunately we're just not getting any response. And you know, as well, I've got to be honest, we didn't have much response from a lot of the supporters clubs as well, and that's the fans. Yeah. So that is actually has been another issue that we have had. I mean, you can't fully put all of the fault, if you like, onto the clubs. We have had, you know, some blocks when it comes to supporters clubs as well. So, you know, it's never been, when we got riders and that, we've got some riders on our page and stuff as well. You know, there's a lot of riders out there that share the same views, you know, because you're a rider doesn't mean you're not a fan of the sport at the end of the day. And it is quite helpful to sometimes get the opinions from riders because they obviously see it from a different viewpoint than what we do. But essentially, we're just obviously so passionate about the sport. I mean, for all of us, it's been part of our lives, you know, since we're kids pretty much. And we just want to do what we can to improve it and get new faces coming along. But we can only do that if these clubs and promoters and that are prepared to listen to, I say, not we as in sitting here, we as the collective, the fans, what we've got to say.
No,
so really, That's what it is.
Yeah,
Listen.
no, 100% in agreement with you, Sam. And if there's anyone out there watching this and learning and hearing about the Speedway Fans Network UK for the first time, or maybe you already have a better appreciation as to what these guys are trying to achieve, on behalf of us as supporters, on behalf of the sport, we only ever want the best for Speedway. We want it to grow and gain in strength, etc., and appeal. So if anyone out there is watching and remotely wants to get in touch with Sam or either of the Davids or Speedway Fans Network UK, as an entity, as an individual, to submit your own ideas or to offer some sort of direct support, then presumably Sam, David, the easiest thing to do is just to get in touch via the Facebook page.
Yeah, just go onto the Facebook page and either just join or just direct message us. Everybody can see the page. The thing is, although it's a private group, that doesn't stop people seeing it. It just stops them seeing what other people have said until they are a member. And as I said before, we're very, very open to comments from anybody, good or bad, as long as they're constructive. All we've said is we want people to approach it in a positive way. Whether even if it's a negative comment, if it's approached in a positive way, then there's something you can do with it. And we, since the start, or since Fans Voices started, have been collating and submitting those ideas to Phil Morris every month or thereabouts, and certainly in advance of the AGMs. And if anyone goes onto our page, we're completely open. We put those in a file section at the top, so anyone can look in and see what other people have said. They can see how often they've said it. They can filter the spreadsheet to cut and slice it, however they want. And we're completely open about that.
David L, perhaps to bring you back in again, can you give us a sense, David, of some of the sort of recurring themes? So presumably you get lots of suggestions. You capture them. I think you mentioned a spreadsheet. You capture them and you can filter it and all that good stuff. But presumably, largely they will fall into recurring groupings of similar themed ideas. Can you give us a sense, David L, of some of those groupings or some of those ideas that you have passed on to the powers that be?
Derek, sorry to interrupt, David, but Derek, just to sort of I think differentiate. So with David's role as the Leicester Fans Voice rep, whilst David is a member of our group, he doesn't get involved in the admin of our group. Okay. So in terms of the collating of the wider spreadsheet,
yes,
Speedway Fans Network do that. David will do stuff directly on behalf of Leicester, which is slightly different. Yeah.
Okay, understood. So David, let me put that question to you then, David. Can you share a sense of some of those themes or groupings of suggestions that typically you picked up and given some credence to and transformed into comments that you've fed up the line?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you had to sort of summarise those views, I think everybody is clear that not every supporter idea is viable or cost effective, or some clubs have got greater limitation on what they can do than others. But in broad brush, I think what supporters want all the time is some indication that there is actually a plan for British Speedway going forward, whether that's a 5-year plan, a business plan, call it whatever you like, but something exists that shows that there's an intention to grow British Speedway, to attract new fans, to attract new audiences, to develop the rider base. We all hear now about the shortage of riders, and to bring new tracks on, or to get returning tracks back in. And then when they submit their ideas, one of the key bits of feedback we get is, it would just be nice to know which ones of those ideas are thought to be viable, or ones that could work with a bit more work on them, and how you would develop that. I think the issue is the feedback our members will give is there's no transparency, there's no information coming back. And the difficulty then, and Philip Lanning said this very much, I think, on one of your previous podcasts, people they'll either stop giving ideas because they don't see any value in doing it, or even worse, they start being negative as their sort of first point of contact. So someone will now say, as soon as something comes up, the immediate response is a negative response rather than looking for a positive response. So I think, everybody wants to see British Speedway improve and get back to where it was, or at least to be seen to be on a trajectory to get back to where it was. And they'll happily give ideas. Yeah. They'll happily talk about what would make it a better evening out at Speedway, what would see more people come in to watch. But if you constantly get knocked back or get no feedback, which is even worse, then people stop giving ideas.
Thanks, David. Sam, if I can bring you back in, so the process, based on my understanding of the process, so ideas are submitted. David L. at Leicester and others of his peers around some other circuits will kind of harvest ideas from their club, feed it into you guys, you capture it, you presumably you triage it in some way. So presumably as a committee, you will filter out things that you automatically know can't work or is unrealistic. So you apply some sort of logic around viability, etc., and then pass that on into Phil, I think. And to Phil's credit, he's a busy guy, he's a busy man with lots of responsibilities, and and in fairness to him, even to have engaged with the process to some extent is a feather in his cap. But just to pick up on what David you've just been talking about, Sam, have we now reached a stage where, for whatever reasons, that process or the feedback loop has ceased? It's going to halt to some extent. Is that where we are?
I would say that. I'd say because one, obviously the people that we've got within the group have been in the group, the majority of them, for a good sort of year plus now, I would say. So, once people put their ideas out there, you either get it repetitive, or they just won't put the idea across again because they've already done it. So there is an element now where we are starting to come to a bit of a halt and a bit of a slowdown with it in that respect. But also as well, I think, as like what David's just said, that because people, aren't getting a response or even an acknowledgement, this is what really grinds me, is that there's not even an acknowledgement to say that sometimes things have been received. Credit to Phil, he has acknowledged that he gets what we send and he's read it and he did his part and he read it all or gave it in document form to all the clubs, but then it's on their heads that they didn't follow it through. There wasn't even anything to say to all those people that put all that information across, thanks for the feedback. Nothing, not a single thing. Say we emailed all of the clubs and no one got back. Berwick did briefly, but after that was it. Not even an email to say thanks, but no thanks. I mean, it would have been frustrating, but at least you would have had an acknowledgement. And this really gets me because I just cannot believe. Well, I do believe it now, but to begin with, it was just absolutely gobsmacked at the lack of response and interest that we got. And admittedly, at first, obviously, we were nobodies. Nobody knew who we were. None of the clubs knew who we were. Appreciate that. But when the email was sent out, Phil Morris obviously gave us the okay to drop his name in and say what we were doing and, that we're all part of this group and everything. And he was encouraging for us to get involved, especially with it being the championship, because essentially speaking, that wasn't his area because he was a premiership. And we just got nothing back, and he wasn't particularly pleased with that either. So I think a lot of the problem, like what David said, is that people are just getting fed up now with hitting brick walls, and we are. I'm not going to lie. We're at a point now where we are at our wits' end with it, because what else do we do? Yeah. We've done stuff even beyond what we discussed. I mean, the amount of stuff we've done, contacted David in particular has contacted local councils, and we've got information within our page. People want to contact councils and stuff like that. We've had meetings with various different people in and around the sport over the sort of 2.5 years. There's been so much that we've done. And every single time, I'd almost go to a point to say that we haven't really achieved anything other than what we have achieved is we have done our part. We've got people's voices heard, but we've not achieved anything beyond that. Yeah.
One of the positives that we do see is some of the things that have been suggested or we've suggested, some clubs are doing, but they're doing it individually, and it always strikes me like when Rob Godfrey was on, and he acknowledged the amount of work that Plymouth appeared to have put in last year and how they were growing the crowd, but he didn't give me any sense that he knew why that was. And this is I think one of the feelings that the supporters would have generally is that clubs are operating individually as opposed to operating as a sort of an association that's sharing their ideas. Mm-hmm. And as a result, as a sport as a whole, British Speedway, it seems to me, is missing out on lots of potentially positive things they could share around. So, as an example, last year, when Birmingham were running, they managed to get an association with, I think it was with Warwickshire Cricket. What's one of the big sporting successes at the moment that people always talk about is 2020 cricket. Yep. So surely, if I had been in charge of Birmingham, which thank God I wasn't because I haven't got the money, but one of the things I would have tried to do is exploit that relationship to find out, well, how is 2020 cricket getting all these new supporters and how are you targeting, how are you marketing it? But not just Birmingham. If I were the BFPL, I would have been saying to Birmingham, right, who's your contact? How do I get in there? How do I find out about that? Because whether people, particularly cricket fans like myself, might think 2020 and particularly the 100 is not a great form of the game, but they are getting in thousands of people, and the question is, why? I was fortunate enough 2 years ago. I went to I was in Australia and I went to one of the big Bash League games, so their big 2020 tournament. They had 40,000 people at a game in Perth at night for what was essentially a qualifying game. It wasn't a final, it was just one of the group games. From the minute I arrived to the minute I left, something was going on all the time. Okay. They were playing music between balls, not alone between overs. Yeah. And one of the most popular things that happened was they had a competition for people to throw a Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket onto another fan's head to win $100. That got as big a cheer as some of the cricket did, but that was because they were involving the people who were there in the event. Yeah. The whole evening was an event. Yeah. And I think, that's just an example where I think British Speedway is missing out on opportunities that are dropping into their lap.
Well, David, you're just listening to you. I'm nodding along internally as well. There's so many things that British Speedway could do. I sometimes think that given the current profile that British Speedway has, that we probably punch above our weight in terms of crowds and local media attention, but that's down to the efforts of each individual club. Each individual club is fighting the fight. There's no one at the helm steering it. And going back to the interview with Rob a couple of weeks ago, he did talk about he did introduce and suggest that Speedway Futures are the new guardians of the sport, and whatever they say will happen. If they want the clubs to do something, the clubs will do it. Now it remains to be proven whether that will or won't be the case. But so I'm hopeful that that could yet come to fruition, and we as supporters will begin to tangibly see evidence of some of that. But one thing you just said, David, which struck a chord with me as well, is I'm mindful when we talk on 360 Speedway about we've critiqued British Speedway and we've made some suggestions about things to freshen up the product, etc., and enhance the value for money. And I'm conscious when I say all these things out loud that not to spend other people's money, right? But some of the things that we've talked about and some of the things you've just referenced from 2020 cricket or whatever is free. There's no money to throw a KFC box on someone's head,
Yeah. No, I don't want to sort of dominate this conversation, particularly because I'm conscious David still hasn't had a chance to say anything about his involvement at Leicester.
At this point, I think I'm just an image.
One of the other things that we did,
David, I was going to ask you, David. Sam and David, you have talked about things drying up a little bit. The feedback, the lack of response, and acknowledgement, etc. I just wondered, and I don't know quite when you materially noticed that had started to happen, but I wonder whether the winter that we've just had, British Speedway, we've all been subject to and felt the frustrations of the most difficult winter, certainly at Premiership level, that the sport's ever had in my lifetime, certainly. And I wonder whether that alone has disenfranchised people, David, and switched people off from coming forward.
Yeah, so for me with Leicester, I get people sort of emailing me, asking me questions about some of the stuff that we do or don't do at the stadium, and I then go and have conversations with the club, and I always try and make sure I ask as many questions as I can to the club. And even when I first met Jen, our promoter / stadium manager / commercial manager, along with John Harvey, Cubs team manager as she was this year, all the different hats she's wearing. The very first time I met her and had a conversation with her, I went in, thought, I've got these ideas, and went through them all. And she'd already had the same ideas. She'd already looked into the same ideas. She'd already tried to sort out the same ideas. And for every idea I had, she never said no. And she's never said no to me at all about, we're never going to do that, we can't do that, whatever. She's always reluctantly had to tell me kind of why we're currently not doing things and stuff like that. And then I've gone back to the person that's emailed me or whatever, or I've met them in the stadium and spoke to them because I want to have a conversation. That's the important thing for me, is have conversations. And thankfully, the fans kind of have understood the situation. And even in my programme notes, I've tried to put ideas out there, what do Leicester fans want to see? And sometimes I get responses back, and they're the ones I take to Jen. Other times it falls on deaf ears. And that's me, that's the club, me sort of representing the club, going to the fans.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird one where sometimes I think I've cracked it, I think I'm onto something, and then it goes quiet again. And that's during the season, that's been over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's, right, okay, move on to the next idea. Try and see if that connects with the fans. And I thought, naively, one of my first interviews on the Centre Green with our Centre Green presenter Rob was, if I said, I've got Phil Morris's phone number and I can message him whenever I want, and he will reply, not necessarily straight away, but he does reply, I thought that would get people's attention. No. and so then when you get through the winter, it's right, how can I keep the fans engaged? What can I get them doing? So the first winter, it was the AGM feedback, which Sam and they were very kindly sent on behalf of all the reps, plus their championship stuff. And then it was the waiting game. Then it was, have a bit of fun of who do we think the divided sign is going to be. And we've got a great Facebook group ourselves for the Leicester fans, Leicester Lions, Speedway fans. It's a great group that I loiter around in and pinch up people's ideas from and feedback from and stuff like that. But then you come to this winter, which, as you say, it's the first time I can recall ever a winter like this where, you're waiting for the usual AGM, team news, season tickets, fixtures. They're the four things you're waiting for. Not really much else over the winter. You just want to know what the AGM was, what your team is, when your season tickets go on sale, and when are the fixtures.
Yeah.
Because of such the extraordinary winter that this has been, with Birmingham unfortunately going, which the news they could plan for that, and then Sheffield going up for sale, Ipswich going up for sale, Oxford stopped running the Spires, TNT no longer being the TV provider because of the whole thing that they're going through with being merged with Warner Brothers and being unmerged with Warner Brothers, or being bought by Netflix or not being bought by Netflix, and all that stuff that I'm a nerd into as well. You're then all of a sudden waiting for the AGM to happen, because it happened 2 months, 3 months late.
Yeah.
Your season tickets for the Premiership can't go on sale because they are working on trying to make sure there's, well, hopefully 6 clubs, which would be great if it was. Even the Championship fixtures went out today at lunchtime.
That's right.
So it's a whole unique scenario that I don't think anyone's ever experienced. So everyone's freaking out.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
and then you've got the fans. The fans freaking out because they're not being told anything. But then the clubs can't really say anything because they're trying to get everything sorted out.
Yeah. But to Sam's earlier point, we I'm using the royal we here, but you guys and the people who are involved in feeding in ideas, no one expects that every idea that you suggest is going to be adopted. Of course you don't, but it would be nice to see evidence that something has been adopted, something has been rolled out across other tracks. Sam, I was going to ask, bring us back up to date. Is the process, is the engagement technically, officially still in place, or or do you need to kind of validate that with Phil or someone else to ensure that there's some merit in moving forward?
I mean, as it stands at the moment, as far as we know, the fans' voice reps are still a thing. We haven't been told otherwise. So yeah, that's still going as far as we know. From our perspective, we're just almost in the situation we were from day one, in that we're supposed to be essentially representing the Championship, National Development League and all those without clubs, yet we've got nothing in a way to represent because nobody got back in touch with us. We've got nowhere to go with all this information that we've got. Yes, we've gone to Phil, but Phil has his own obstacles. Phil, I think sometimes people forget that Phil's not running the sport. He hasn't actually got the authority to go, I want to do this and make it happen. He can take the best ideas in the world to all of the clubs. But if they turn around and say, nah, we don't really want to do that, there's nothing he can do. So his hands are tied to an extent as well. And this is the problem. And as we're saying, they're all running separately. I think Rob Godfrey did say on the podcast with you that he feels that there is no division between Premiership and Championship. I personally think there's quite an obvious division between those two. That's just my opinion. But, and there's divisions just between the clubs. And I mean, that's obvious for everybody to see as well. So I think like what David Umley already sort of touched upon, for as long as these clubs are all running for themselves, which is essentially, I'm afraid, what they are doing, I can't see how we're going to get out of this sort of vicious circle that we're in. And say for us, we will take anybody's views and questions and all of that. We're still in touch with Phil Morris, even if he was to say the fans reps have had its day, still got his email address, so I can still contact him. Can still hound the guy. But, he would still be open, I'm sure, to hearing what people have got to say. hearing, anything, that is useful that anybody, has got to say, I'm sure he'd have no problems with that information being fed back. But it's no point just going to him and then nothing else happens. And this is what's happening.
Yeah.
So for us at the moment, we are in a situation where our group as a whole has come to a bit of a halt because no one is listening to us.
Understandably so. Listen, I've got no confirmed knowledge of this, but I've got reason to suspect that Phil Morris, Phil, if you are watching, looks in on 360 Speedway, at least on occasion. So Phil, if this particular discussion topic has got your attention, if there's anything you can do, Phil, to help unblock some of the good work and the good intention behind the Speedway Fans Network UK and the Fans Voice initiative as well, we would be super grateful to hear from you and hopefully to get things flowing again. David, I'm going to come to you. I'm just outside looking in, thinking on my feet a little bit, granted, but given what Rob Godfrey had said a couple of episodes back, I just wonder whether given the new operating model that Rob was talking about, with Speedway Futures calling the shots in terms of the direction of British Speedway, I wonder whether these ideas, these collated suggestions should be directed into Speedway Futures. Actually, there might be things that they should be considering.
No, absolutely, and I think a couple of things. So firstly, don't take what we're saying as being any kind of criticism of Phil, because that's certainly not the intention. Likewise with Rob Godfrey, I think I don't want to be highly critical of Rob, because that would be wrong. But there are quite a few questions I'd like to ask him if I met him. So in terms of the Speedway Futures Limited. So one of the things I said a little while ago is what fans are looking for is a bit of transparency. Now, clearly they can't tell us commercial deals they're working on, but what Rob could have done, given that he is a member of the SCB, he's the chairman of British Speedway, and he's on Speedway Futures as a director, I believe. So it's one thing saying Speedway Futures will become the independent body. Well, he'd have to explain the independence to me when he's on all three boards. But if as a ridiculous thing, Speedway Futures said, our feedback is, if you all went the other way around the track and had 6 riders in a race, that would save Speedway. The clubs couldn't do that because the ACU delegated the running of Speedway to the Speedway Control Bureau. So it needs a bit more explanation. And I think Speedway fans can be trusted with a bit more transparency, with a bit more information. It doesn't have to be commercially sensitive information. It just has to be the framework. Yeah. How is this working? What's the intention? My understanding from the only press release that's gone out about Speedway Futures is they have in some way acquired the media rights to British Speedway. Well, explain that. How have they acquired them? Was there a payment for that? Are they? What are they doing? How does that relate to the rule book? And I think things like that we can be trusted with some of that information. And if there was a bigger flow of information two-way, I think the sport would get a much better service that it could use, or a much better relationship with the supporters. And I think that they need to, something needs to happen to get that trust back from supporters. And then, maybe promoters would say a similar thing, that they need a bit more leeway from supporters, but explain it. Let's have an open discussion. I mean, I did when we submitted the ideas that we knew Phil was going to put to the AGM for us. I did say, I'd be very happy. Any one of us would be very happy to come to the AGM and present that. Kick us out for anything that's controversial or confidential. But let's have a two-way discussion. And of course, that didn't happen. I'm sure if you get Lee Coleman on, Lee will say very similar. He's put forward proposals, would happily have a discussion, but can't get past that door to break it down. So it's great when you get like David saying, he's got a good relationship at Leicester and can have direct access to the promoter and the promotional team. We need to have that same sort of thing in other clubs, but for there to be that sort of sharing together, we're stronger if we do it all together, not as individuals and individual clubs, because there is some good practice out there.
Yes.
I was really impressed when I went to Glasgow last year for the semi-final against Edinburgh. But the whole thing, from parking in the car park, just walking from the car park down the road to the stadium, seeing the banners on the side of the buildings, which talked about motorcycle racing, not speedway racing. So immediately you're opening that up to people. Everybody understands what motorbike racing is. They may not understand what speedway racing is.
Yeah.
But it's got a better chance of piquing their interest. Now, I'm sure Glasgow will have lots of feedback about the work they're doing, and that could it may well be being shared, but you'd never know that from some of the things that go on.
You would never know, David. You're right. You would never know. You know, and I touched on it earlier. I think you could probably cherry pick something from every club in the land. Every club will be doing something a little bit different or a little bit better than other clubs. But it's the collective benefit of kind of harnessing that.
If you do a simple Google search for something like how to improve fan experience, how to improve fan engagement, there's tons and tons and tons of sensible information that clubs in other sports have used. Now you've got to tailor it down a bit, because what the NFL can do in America is slightly different to what an individual speedway club can do in the UK. But there's lots of commonality, and as you quite rightly said earlier on, a lot of those ideas don't cost money.
Correct.
They just take a bit of time, and there's lots of willing people in speedway, lots of willing fans who will give their time, who will do stuff. I mean, David's prime example, quite happy to invest his time in Leicester. There will be lots of people in lots of clubs or with no club who will happily do that, happily get involved to try to drive it forward. But you've got to make it seem as though they're welcome,
you've got to engage, and you've got to respect, and things snowball. So when you're in a conversation with people and you're talking about something speedway or something else, the people that you're talking to will have useful contacts that might help you take a step deeper into something. Yeah, it's amazing how many skills and useful contacts there will be in the speedway community that are completely untapped. And could be to the benefit of the sport. Listen, I've got one out on the time. It has been genuinely and seriously interesting and insightful to hear from you guys and hear about part at least of the journey that you guys have been on. And I only want to express my empathy with you that you feel things have perhaps run aground a little bit currently, but again, I'm looking at the camera. Phil Morris. Absolutely no criticism of you, Phil. But you have been receptive and fully engaged with these guys. And if there's anything you can do behind the scenes to redirect some of that effort into Speedway Futures or some other department potentially that could take a look at some of those ideas and potentially, absolutely give some feedback. I think it's important that, any ideas are taken on board and considered, assessed, and if they're rejected, I think it's useful to feedback the reasons for the rejection. So why is it judged to be non-viable? I think that would be useful, and that would then help you to triage future ideas as well. But listen, I thoroughly appreciate your time coming on to 360 Speedway and giving a bit of insight into all things Speedway Fans Network UK. Hopefully on the back of this you might get a little flurry of activity or contact from the wider Speedway community. But for now, Sam Loriman, David Umney and David Lowe, thank you very much for your time on 360 Speedway.
Thank you. Before we disappear, Derek, what I'll say is when this goes live on Facebook, thank you very much for having us. When this does go live on Facebook, I'll comment and I'll follow where you post it all with my name, with my email address. Anyone's visiting Leicester, feedback, suggestions, if you're a fan of Leicester and you've missed me in the stadium with my customised program board, or not seeing my page in the program, I'll put my email address. If you want to help out Leicester, please get in touch with me,
Thank you,
and
David.
I'll do my best.
Thank you very much.
And Derek, I'll see you in a few weeks' time.
I'll see you for the Ben Fund, no doubt, at Glasgow. David.
Oh yeah, I've just booked the hotel.